Let's maybe start, if we can, just with a sense of some scene setting, because obviously it's been a challenging 18 months for those in the airline business, given everything we've seen. What's it been like standing up a new lifecycle marketing function during that period, and what was it in response to?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So first of all, thank you for having me here today. On my drive in this morning to my office here in Atlanta, I was listening to a podcast and they said that today is International Day for Failure. So if I stumble my way through this presentation, just chalk it up to that, and it's a day to recognize what we've learned from our failures, which is actually applicable to this conversation in the lifecycle marketing origin. So, we had thoughts and ideas of creating a lifecycle marketing team at Delta prior to COVID. And it was under the vision of bringing together two historically siloed teams here in marketing, a retail and performance marketing team with a relationship and loyalty marketing team, with the idea that one team was really focused on short-term revenue that drives customers down a path to purchase. And then we'd pass them off to the relationship marketing team to drive them along a path to passion. Those ideas were formulating prior to COVID. COVID hit, and the team formed, I want to say in April or May, after we were giving ourselves a little bit of a buffer in crisis mode. But as you can imagine, the first days of COVID, the first months didn't really lend itself to creating lifecycle marketing strategies. We were, in crisis. So what it did, though, is it did give us the opportunity to take a bit of a step back and reorient ourselves around general marketing principles, the basics of being customer obsessed. It gave us the opportunity to look at the world in a different way, really around our audience framework and who do we really need to be influencing during this time. So we created a generally new audience framework that consisted of core buckets of audience groups. And two that we were really looking at were those who were hesitant to travel, indicated by their lack of flight behavior, who have historically been frequent flyers during this time. Those who are actively shopping and actually showing some intent. And then those who are booking and have booked. So I think, stepping back and looking at our audience framework and building it in that way gave us even more purpose than I think the lifecycle marketing team originally intended for. And it takes great intention and understanding of a customer mindset to truly deliver the right message at the right time.
Yeah, so obviously it gave you that moment's pause, I suppose, the pandemic. Looking at it positively, I'm a naturally positive person. I always like to take the silver linings wherever I can find them. So obviously it gave you an opportunity to think about things differently. Now, what for you was, I guess, the most important first step when you kind of you're faced with this crisis? You're obviously in crisis mode. There are certain things that have to happen as a priority. But after that initial work was done, what were kind of the important elements for you to get right?
Yeah, so organizing in the chaos was incredibly important. So the world was crumbling. We were pausing if not all, most of our marketing campaigns and marketing activity, if not all, brand campaigns were being paused. Selling tickets, which is what my team's bread and butter, stopped. And we had to reorient ourselves into the roles that we played for the marketing organization, right? So where teams were previously focused on selling tickets to specific destinations, they sort of paused and started to work on other things that were more helpful for the customer at the time. And so our marketing department essentially turned into a communications powerhouse around health and safety. And how do we reinforce the messages that customers need to know at this time? And so what I think was incredibly helpful from that short crisis period initially, and what we took with us for the rest of the year and even into this year, was how we are intentional about matching what we are marketing and that marketing experience to what the customer is going to experience on board our planes. So setting expectations ahead of a customer experience is critical to gain trust and to get repeat business and long-term loyalty. So I think a big thing of what we did was taking a look at, what we were selling and how we were selling it into what and how we service on board. And so an example of that was Delta was the airline to keep its middle seats blocked longer than any other carrier, right? We were making a promise to customers that we were keeping that extra space on board. First, it started as a health and safety precaution. Then it transitioned to, we're just going to do the right thing to give customers more comfort because that's what they want. So what we ended up doing was really reinforcing that middle seat block into everything that we were doing in terms of retail marketing and loyalty communications. So whenever you saw a banner ad touting our destinations or marketing our destinations, you also saw a mention of our Delta Care standard and that customer promise to clean. So, we also reinvigorated our pre-flight communications. And so we had to essentially re-educate customers on how to fly, right? A lot of people had to relearn what it meant to get on an airplane and what they needed to do at a gate, what they needed to know for what was happening on board. So there was a lot of re-education that was happening. And all of these marketing touch points, I think, was matching what the customer was going to experience on board, which then resulted in record NPS scores for our company. So I think, one of the takeaways when we think about it, and I believe you guys are talking about experience and how marketing and experience need to align more seamlessly moving forward. I think one of the key takeaways for us here at Delta was how marketing touch points must, we're being held to a higher standard to ensure that we are setting the tone for what the customer is going to experience with the product. So I think there was even more scrupulous eye on marketing. I think there was more credit and a desire for marketing and marketing communications than ever during this time period, and how we, are the ones really setting the tone for what the customer is going to experience with the product later on.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So how are you balancing this kind of newfound remit to be a communication powerhouse with that initial remit of obviously driving sales, selling tickets? Because presumably as travelers start to come back, so has that part of the role. So how are you balancing that now that you've kind of got these two drivers that you're trying to meet?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all goes back to really understanding where a customer is in their journey. And I think COVID allowed us that opportunity to take a step back, to be much more intentional about talking to customers based on where they are. And I think this idea of health and safety and people were scared to fly really gave us that moment to really say, like, who needs to be sold, who needs to be comforted, and who just needs to know that we're there for them as a brand. So I think as we we were putting the airline to sleep, and as we started to come back from being asleep, we really started to focus first on not really driving demand, but capitalizing on the demand that was there. And it was a slow walk back to doing more and more in the market in terms of driving tickets. But to your point, there was very much a balance of customers who are still showing hesitancy for one reason or another. How are we going to talk to them? And what sort of Delta message can we put in front of them that's not going to be tone deaf, but it's still showing them that we care and that we want them to stay engaged? So we did a lot of work with our SkyMiles members and sending communications to them about other ways that they could stay involved with Delta during that time, even if they didn't want to fly. We were talking to them about our Delta gift card because there were still a lot of holidays that were happening during this time period. And Mother's Day was looking a lot different. Father's Day was looking a lot different. So reminding them of the Delta gift card products that we had, reminding them of the SkyMiles partnerships that are in our portfolio and how they could continue to earn miles through our partners, like a Lyft, for example, and some of our dining partners, et cetera, working with our co-brand team to also talk to them about how our card has more benefits for them for everyday earning on restaurant purchases, things like that. So it certainly was a balance to take a step back to say, like, who needs to be sold to, or who is going to be interested in wanting to take a flight right now, versus where do we need to have a little bit of softer selling tactics. It also came to life in what we call our fair marketing strategy. So we send communications on a monthly and biweekly basis around destinations that we're marketing to customers. So, think deal-based communications. We bifurcated those communications into those who are hesitant to fly based on their behaviors of lack of Delta activity, and those who were more active to fly and showing some sort of propensity to book by way of their behaviors on delta.com or had previously purchased a ticket during the COVID period. To the customers who are more hesitant, we were much more inspiration focused and less price focused. To customers who had some sort of intent or had previously booked, we were much more retail and price forward than we were around driving inspiration for our destinations, because we know that their mindsets were different. So I think it really gave us the opportunity to look at mindsets in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, and it's a very different way of thinking about segmentation, I suppose. So what has it forced you to reconsider as you think about segmentation moving forward? How has that changed from thinking about traditional segmentation metrics such as social demographics, financial demographics, etc.? How are you now shifting that thinking?
I think that is the most exciting space for Delta right now, and for my team, aside from our MarTech roadmap and building out the platforms and infrastructure we need on the data side and the data connectivity side. There's a real moment happening right now for us that is taking a look at that audience framework that marketing reinvigorated that I mentioned around their customers that are showing behavioral data triggers around their hesitancy or lack of hesitancy, their active intent to shop, if they've booked or not. So we're still looking at behavioral segmentation, but we're starting to take a bigger look at attitudinal segmentation as well. So not just what the data is showing us and where they are in their journey, but why they purchase a ticket and what drives them, what motivates them to fly, what motivates them to earn in our SkyMiles program, what do they care about when choosing a carrier. So really, it's doing a lot of that work around how do we take attitudinal segmentation overlaid with behavioral segmentation, and also thinking about trip purpose. So why is someone buying a ticket, and is it for a leisure trip or a business trip? And how does that affect their attitudes in buying? And then we look at where they are in the journey based on the behaviors that they're showing us. They're either searching or they're not searching, or they just booked, or they have just flown, and how do we engage them after a flight? So that is really a journey that we're on right now. And I think what's fantastic about what's going on at Delta is that that's not just marketing owned. It is an enterprise-wide initiative right now. And so I think we're having easier conversations across the business, that this isn't just a marketing priority of being customer obsessed, but the whole company is looking at the same sort of segmentation and thinking about how we can even design experiences around that.
It's a fascinating journey, Sarah, and I'm kind of interested to know, because obviously there are restrictions, and we're talking about this further on in the summit, this idea of first-party data, restrictions around use of first-party data, collection of it, what you can do with it once you have it. So an effort like this, where you're doing lots of different layers of segmentation, obviously requires huge amounts of data. So how are you approaching that, and how are you getting the information that you want about your consumers in order to be able to serve them up with the right type of communications?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and I think it's the question on every marketer's mind right now. Moving into a cookieless world, how do I target, how do I segment in a smarter way so that I can drive automation and personalization? I think here at Delta, we have a unique benefit in the amount of first-party data that we do have. We've got a lot of transaction history, trip history on hand that another industry like CPG or what have you might not have that. So we are lucky here. I think the opportunity that we have at Delta is being able to connect all that data across all of our systems, so that it's not just an opportunity for marketing to find the right segments, to trigger the right message to the right customer at the right time, and really understand where they are. But it's a journey that we have across the business as you think about how data connectivity could impact a reservations agent, and what they know about a customer and what they can see about that customer's journey as well, and how they talk to them or how they help them through in a regular operation with our business or with their ticket or help manage a ticket. And again, it's how our brand experience team is looking at that data to design experiences on board that speak to customers more specifically. So it is definitely a journey that we are on. We are still building, the right platforms and infrastructure here in order to use that data in a more meaningful way. But it's exciting that, again, it's not just a marketing opportunity, but the enterprise is thinking about data in a much more meaningful way than we have in the past.
Yeah, and we'll maybe kind of touch upon how you kind of been bringing the entire organisation with you on the journey as we go further into this. But I just want to return to this idea about balancing automation and personalisation. And how you're striking that balance, because obviously there is this huge drive to offer more relevant, more contextual communications and offers to customers, but doing that at scale is a challenge for many. So how are you finding that balance?
Yeah, it is a challenge, right? To me, automation and personalization shouldn't be mutually exclusive. It is, we have to drive automation in service of a personalized experience for a customer. A recent research report that I saw talked a lot about how personalization commands a premium and how something like 30%, 36% of travelers are willing to pay more for a ticket when you give them a more personalized experience and communicate them in a more personalized way. So it's definitely something that we continue to look at in terms of our MarTech stack and what platforms and infrastructure do we need to bring in here. But I think even the small steps that we are taking towards that journey are working. So we recently deployed a machine learning model in one of those fair marketing communications that I mentioned previously, where we're really selling destinations. And when we use that machine learning model that is based on, previous customer behavior or customers who look similar to you, you think about that Netflix model, movies recommended for me, kind of similar, destinations recommended for me. We are seeing about a 60% uptick in marketing attributable revenue when we use that model. So automation and personalization need to go hand in hand. And you're right, it is about scaling it and how do you scale efficiently, and you need to use that. You need to use tools and platforms to help you do that right. But dynamic content optimization tools, if you don't use one, those certainly help you scale in a more efficient manner. It's just, the work comes in the decision tree behind that DCO, and how personalized you need to go, and how many customers or how many segments you need to target there.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And once you've obviously freed up a bit of time in the marketing department by automating that, employing some of those machine learning models, what then are you redeploying people to do? Where are you seeing your people add the most value once a lot of that administrative burden of those manual, repetitive tasks that can be automated is taken off the table?
Yeah, it's giving people deep thinking time. And so it's the opportunity of the automation here and using more machine learning models and modeling out. It frees people up from the churn of ad hoc campaigns all the time into more automated trigger-based campaigns that we can then optimize over time. And, I think that's sort of like the ideal, the nirvana that we all want to get to when it comes to performance marketing and CRM. And it takes a while to get there, but it does allow the team to start thinking about what I have seen, right? It has allowed my team to start thinking about things we want to test and optimize and first to market opportunities versus just focusing on the slog of getting a campaign out the door. The team is now thinking about what are those first optimizations and tests against, a core business goal that we want to achieve versus just getting down in the weeds and focusing so specifically on the day-to-day.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. We've got some audience questions in the queue, so I'm going to maybe just ask one more question myself, and then we'll hand over to our attendees. And it's really about this idea of marketing leadership. Now, obviously, you've had to stand up this organisation, this new function during a hugely challenging period. There were periods, I'm sure, when you were working in a distributed way. You mentioned earlier that you're now moving to more of a hybrid, sort of flexible working model as well, that's involving physical contact as well. So what were the sort of the biggest lessons that you learned over that time about how to drive through change, how to transform the organization when you're working in this very difficult environment?
Yeah, it's a question that I get asked a lot, and I always go back to a quote that our CEO Ed Bastian made during COVID, and it was, "Crises don't build character; crises reveal character." And so that idea and that takeaway was seen in spades across the marketing department. Right, we had to be more agile, more flexible, more adaptable, more resilient than ever. And that word resilience, we're seeing pop up a lot in cultural conversations right now, as I'm sure many of you have and are experiencing with your teams. And there are headlines now around the burnout generation and the Great Resignation and the Great Retention period, and what are we going to do to keep people? And this idea of resilience, I don't think can necessarily be taught. I think resilience has to be modeled. And so it's incumbent on all of us as leaders to model a resilient mindset, and how we model for our teams, what it means to kind of to put on our bootstraps and keep going, but also what it means to pause and take a break and know when to step away and model that behavior. So I think from a leadership standpoint, that has really stuck with me, that quote from Ed around crises revealing character, because it's so true, and what it means for us to grow our teams, to be more resilient and agile. And I just think, from a hard skill standpoint, what COVID has revealed to me and this crisis has revealed to me is that I think we're going to be looking more and more for people who embody both creative skill sets and analytical, data-driven skill sets too. I think the notion of comms planning and integrated marketing and connections planning, and bringing those types of thinkers and roles in-house and not just relying on those sort of thinkers that in our agency partners is going to be sort of critical in a next wave of the type of people that we're looking to bring in to have us grow the marketing organization.